Hello and welcome to the first and only episode number 19 of Apologetical. And my friend posted, today we're going to talk about some videos from atheists, or more accurately, videos that atheists have used as if it defends their position. My friend posted 3 atheist videos in one day recently, a little bit ago, and I wanted to look at what they say. The first one comes from H3H3. It was hard for me to find the original sources of the videos because it was the Facebook group Dutch Atheists, and they just kind of grab YouTube videos and then repost them on Facebook as if it were their own content. But you might know H3H3. He's a big YouTuber, 5 million subs, makes fun of celebrities. I don't really follow him that closely. Maybe he's good at making fun of celebrities or whatever he does, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is a philosopher. But let's see the point that he makes here. This is him making fun, understandably so, making fun of Steve Harvey. Let's see what he says. This is at 120% speed.
Does he have a relationship with God? You sitting up here talking to a dude and he tells you he's an atheist, you need to pack it up and go home. You know, you're talking to a person who don't believe in God, you finna, what's his moral barometer? Where is that? It's nowhere.
Ladies out there, if you're gonna date somebody, make sure he's religious, okay? Like Steve Harvey here. He's got a moral barometer. That's why he's been married 3 times, and each one of his marriages ended when he cheated on them. He's got a moral barometer.
If you don't believe in God, then where's your moral barometer? That's just me talking. You can believe what you want to believe, but if you're an atheist, you're basing your goodness and morality on what? I mean, but what is an atheist? I don't really get into that. You know, I've talked to people all the time. I'm an atheist. I just walk away.
Very enlightened, dude. You know, I gotta say, it's a little bit scary when I hear religious people saying that if you don't have God, you have no sense of right and wrong. The implication is that if he didn't have the Bible to tell him what was good or not, he'd just be out there raping people. They're really insulting themselves, right? Because it's...
Now that's basically the main argument, that it's not fair to say that religious people are the only people that are good and moral, and atheists are not good and moral. In a sense, this video does make a good point that apparently Steve Harvey, you could say he's a hypocrite for saying that, oh, you should believe in God and should be moral, but he has cheated on wives before. Although what we want when we make these kinds of arguments about the meaning of life, the existence of God, we want to be able to respond to the very best arguments and not just the very worst of arguments. And really, both people, both Steve Harvey and also H3H3, are both going about this debate from a not too helpful angle. We should be able to go a little deeper with this. Although, he's right. It's also a problem that Steve Harvey says, I just walk away from atheists. I don't even talk to them. Of course, we should talk to anyone. We should understand what the other side says. Part of what makes this video funny is that later on, Steve Harvey rightly says that where did the universe come from? You need to have an explanation for that. But then he says other weird things that demonstrate that he doesn't understand the concept of the theory of evolution. So it's hard to reject evolution if you don't really even understand it. But what would be a deeper way to look at this? Of course, atheists can be good people. And, of course, people who say they are Christians, and might even be Christians, can also do some pretty terrible things as well. But the first thing I said is, of course, it's possible for atheists to be good people. Now, why is that? Because they're also, just like me, made in the image of God. All men and women have that imago Dei. We are made in the image of God, and God is good. So it would make sense that there's a correspondence there, that since we were created in the image of God, we naturally have an innate concept for much of what is right and what is wrong. Our consciences are a little wonky sometimes because we live in a Genesis 3 world, and we sometimes are hypocrites and do the wrong things because we live in a Genesis 3 world. But there is that image that's still there. It might be tarnished, but it's there. So, of course, the Christian worldview would expect any man to be able to be good, whether he believes in God or not. So the whole debate about are Christians good or are atheists good, or can we be good without the Bible? Well, sure, in one sense of good, a pretty nice guy, yes. Good enough for to not need Jesus. No, we all need Jesus. But a pretty nice guy that I would like and call a moral person, sure. Because you're made in the image of God, you have great understanding of what is right. And because you're made in the image of God, you're often able to do many of those things. So we would expect you to also be able to be good. But then what's the deeper part of the debate? The deeper part of the debate is, what is good? The Christian worldview is able to explain why morality exists. But if there's no God, if you have a materialistic worldview, then there's no such thing as morality. There is no concept of good or concept of bad. If you have it's just chemicals bumping into each other, if it's all only nothing more than an evolutionary series of accidents, then how do you get any morality from that? That's the deeper question. Because when you have two people with different worldviews, the atheists and the Christians, they're both going to look at data and information and interpret it according to their worldview. So what you actually need to do to see who's right is evaluate both of those worldviews to see which one is consistent, which one actually is able to not have holes in it. And this is a pretty big hole because from this video we can see that, yeah, morality is a thing. We know that there is such a thing as right and wrong. And we recognize that things like stealing and murder are evil. But Christians know why. It's because we're made in the image of God, and morality reflects the goodness of a holy creator. God is good, and that by itself, the existence of God is what defines morality. Now, we're made in the image of God, so lying is wrong because God is not a liar. And if we are his image bearers, we had better not slander and dishonor our Creator by bearing his image and being liars at the same time. So that is what specifically makes morality a thing that humanity deals with, because we are image bearers. And the definition of what is good, objectively good and objectively evil, morality is not popularity. That would be a big ugly mess. Hitler was popular when he was a leader of Germany, but what he did was not moral. So you need to be able to have objective morals, and without God, you don't really have a way to explain where that comes from. So when we have these debates about, good and evil, and are you guys good, or we need to go deeper than who is moral. We're not talking about people who are Christians and people who are atheists. We need to talk about the Christian worldview and the materialistic worldview. We need to not look at people to see who's better, but we need to look at the presuppositions to see which ones are able to stand and which ones are not. So I try to take these conversations to a deeper level, and I tried to do this with that Dutch Atheist Facebook group. So I say, sure, atheists can be moral because they inconsistently plagiarize the Christian worldview, because they are made in the image of God and have an innate sense for immorality. So that, as Dr. Jason Lyle says, if you're not a Christian, you're still going to be a kleptomaniac, a presuppositional kleptomaniac, a worldview kleptomaniac, because if you're not a Christian, your worldview is wrong, it will have holes in it, and in order to fill in the gaps, you need to steal things from the Christian worldview because we actually live in God's world. But it's hard because we're not used to thinking in this way, because we're just so surrounded by a secular culture. It's hard to realize that even these basic things do indeed need God. They do. So even when I say, sure, atheists can be moral, we get responses like, are you saying that without a belief in God we can't be moral? That's not what I said. I said, sure, atheists can be moral, and the response I get is, are you saying that without a belief in God we can't be moral? And I tried to make the same point again, and a response I get again is, and how is it possible that atheists, who are said to be without morals, are not the only criminals in society? So it's good to understand what the other side is saying, and what consistent, thoughtful Christians are saying is not, we're not saying that atheists are bad and Christians are good. What we're saying is that the Christian worldview is true, and one of the many evidences for that is that we are able to make an account for why we have moral outcry against murder and cheating. One of the things that I said to them is that if we have a science fair project where you put with the volcano and that's just chemicals reacting with chemicals. There's no moral outcry against that science experiment. But if we're just an evolutionary mechanical accident, then murder is in the same category as that science experiment. So where does morality come from? The same thing with animals. If you have a spider eat a bug, nobody has a moral outcry. If you have a dog that hooks up with a whole bunch of female dogs, there's no moral outcry against that. So the spider and the dog, so what? But if we're just animals and nothing more, where does morality come from? The dog and the spider, no moral outcry, but if I were to cheat on my wife and murder a hooker prostitute, there should be a moral outcry for that because there's something different. There's an objective evil to end the life of someone who is carrying the image of God. That's why murder is wrong. They're carrying the image of God and you ended that life. That's why murder is wrong. And we're able to actually explain why that is. And worldviews that are not able to explain why morality exists, it can't be a true worldview then. So let's move on to the other one. So let's thank you H3H3 for starting that topic. Now this one, the third video I want to cover in my next apologetical video is really, acerbic and kind of rude to Christians. But this one has a nice educational tone because he's not trying to attack Christianity, he's trying to educate people. This one just comes from these educational videos, but the atheist was using it as if it disproved creationism when it really does not. No, I guess now that I think about it, some of these guys did eventually come up with some theories about how you could have morality from evolution, but it didn't work. Some of them tried to eventually say that if whatever is the greatest good for the society, because spreading genes is evolution, so if that's why you have to be good to each other because it helps the communal genes of your species, and that's where morality comes from. And I really need to reject that as an answer because evolution is kind of dog eat dog. And it's survival of the fittest, and you can't really arrive at the golden rule, treat others as you would want to be treated, from survival of the fittest. It doesn't follow. You might wish that it would, but you can't go from survival of the fittest to the golden rule of morality. It really doesn't work. And that also kind of fails as a response. And some other people in the past might have said that, the definition of morality is that which would cause the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. And even that is another subjective answer. Defining morality by vote and popularity is subjective and it doesn't work. Defining it by evolution just kind of falls apart. And defining it by happiness is also very subjective. To demonstrate that you can't atheistically define morality by more happiness is moral. Let's look at this secular cartoon that describes very well how it is secular, how it is subjective. You cannot arrive at an objective morality, and we know it's bad. If I kill somebody and it's murder, that is bad. If I steal, it is bad. But if you just have the happiness thing, then it tries to explain some of the data of why things are good and why things are bad, but it's still subjective in the end, and let's see why. Here's a thought experiment about if you try to actually make morality based on the happiness of people. Let's see. We created a utilitarian ethics computer to replace the government. Is it ethical to cheat on my wife, computer? Yes, your marriage is a sham and you will find greater love, thus maximizing total happiness. So we already see that instead of actual morality of loving your wife and being committed to her, that you could just leave your wife because it makes you happy. But let's look deeper at this. It was odd at first replacing justice and moral truth with maximum happiness. Should I covet my neighbor's property? Yes, it will inspire you. So it even shows how both theft and cheating on your wife can become moral if you adopt this strange system that the atheists were trying to put forth as the actual definition of morality. But on the whole, things went well. So happiness goes up over time. Oh, okay, this is working. But until a strange person emerged. Should I stole this bread. Should I return it? No, give it to Felix. Who's Felix? The happiest man in the world. The happiest man was so delighted by everything that he was responsible for 1/3 of all happiness on earth. Oh my God, I found a penny, a shiny one. This is better than 1,000 ponies. Slowly but surely, the computer's judgments began favoring this happiest man in order to achieve greater total happiness. Computer, should I end it all? No, we need your body to manufacture lucky pennies for Felix to find. Felix's happiness compounded with each new happy event, which created a feedback loop. Within 1 year, Felix controlled 98% of worldwide happiness. I'm so happy you gave me your life savings. The computer said you'd enjoy it more than me. I'm so happy it said that. Things got worse and worse. So now we have the chart of the happiness of all humanity compared to the happiness of Felix. And soon everyone was enslaved on amphetamine so they could work 23 hours a day to make the happiest man happier. Hooray, another pyramid just for me. And I can't say the story has a happy ending because Felix doesn't let us speak. I like my own voice the best. So that's a very good illustration of how all of these definitions of where morality might come from if you were an atheist don't actually explain where morality comes from. So that it remains that there is a hole in that worldview. And those holes cannot explain morality or laws of logic or things like that. Let's go on to the next one. I said this was educational, but the atheists mistakenly thought this refutes Christianity more than it really does. Let's see.
The known universe is about 93 billion light years in diameter, and is filled with 10 to the 54th kilograms of stuff. And yet physicists say the whole thing came out of nothingness during a single Big Bang nearly 14 billion years ago. How this happened is perhaps the most fundamental question that science can tackle.
So this is a question and a big problem for atheists, because for a long time atheists believed that the universe was eternal and did not need a creator. But now even science is pointing towards a beginning point for the universe. So that would be a tough thing to explain. Where did everything come from? How did you get something, everything even, from nothing?
How exactly do you get something from nothing? It all starts with entropy, which is just a fancy way to talk about disorder. Nothing is as disordered as, well, nothing. You can mix it up, scramble it, rearrange it all you want, and you still have nothing. Something, on the other hand, is orderly. You can't scramble up an atom and still have an atom. So nothing has higher entropy than something, and entropy, on the whole, never decreases. So it seems impossible that nothing could ever turn into something. But
now that's not the only reason why it's a problem to have a creation, to have everything come from nothing. That is an additional layer that creates a problem for atheists, but it's not the only layer. So this video can't actually resolve the dilemma for atheists, but it's just looking at one aspect. The second layer that it brings up is that we know, it's a principle of second law of thermodynamics, that entropy or the disorder of a system always increases over time. It makes sense, like your room gets messy if you don't put in energy to clean it. That's just a silly illustration, but if you entropy and disorder, always there's decay over time. That's all that it's saying. So if there's decay over time and nothing is if you compare nothing to something, then you're going to be more order. So you can't, unless you have God doing something, then you can't go from something to nothing, because something is more orderly. It has more order. But when we observe the world as scientists, science, the laws of science as we know them tell us that disorder always increases. But when you have creation, disorder decreased and order went up. So that's an additional layer of problem for the atheist.
there may be a loophole. One form of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says that a system can't ever have precisely zero energy. And because energy and mass are one and the same, this means that nothingness isn't quite as empty as you might think. If you somehow removed everything from the universe, you'd still find particles popping in and out of existence, caused by nothing but the fundamental randomness inherent in quantum mechanics.
So now we're jumping into quantum mechanics, and essentially the problem with this is that you cannot extrapolate what we think we know about quantum mechanics back to before the world was made. You can't go back before the Big Bang with that. You can't go that far back. And there's many reasons for that. Everything, all the matter in the universe had to come from somewhere, and you just, because you have quantum mechanics, basically what he's saying is that with quantum mechanics there's sometimes infinitesimally small periods of time where you have, they're just randomly jumping into existence and not out of existence. So he's saying that even nothing has something in it, because even if you had emptiness you would see this quantum mechanic effect of some particles jumping into existence. So he's saying that even if before the Big Bang there's no matter, it's all empty, he's saying that, there would still be something even before the Big Bang because of quantum mechanics. But the thing is, we can't go that far back. You can't go to before the Big Bang and say that this quantum mechanic observation would still have been going on. You can't extrapolate that far back. And we actually know this because of the theories of theoretical physics can't go that far back. There's a couple reasons for that. One is that theoretical physics, which is well beyond what we're actually able to do, it's just theory, but even the theory has not been able to unite the Einstein's general relativity with quantum mechanics. They're still two separate things that our math has not been able to tie together yet. That's something that physicists are trying to do, but have not yet succeeded. Like in the same way that Newtonian physics, the stuff you learn in a basic physics class, it really describes forces and how stuff bumps into each other. And that math can describe how things move, but it doesn't work with things that go so fast it's almost the speed of light. For that you need Einstein's general relativity. And as far as we've been able to tell, Einstein was a genius, and general relativity does really describe the world, and that could take us all the way back to the creation of the world, but it can't go back farther than that. And so it is a big question mark. And that's one reason, and the other reason is that just because we observe this quantum mechanic event now doesn't mean that the quantum mechanic event would still happen in the same way before the Big Bang and the universe existed. So we can't go that far back, and theoretical physicists know that. Let's look at quotes about this very thing. This is a quote about how you can't go before the Big Bang with quantum mechanics. Again, this is speculation, not theory. As of yet, these aren't established laws of physics we understand or have checked in any way, said Carroll. As Peter Watt, a theoretical physicist at Columbia University, put it to Gizmodo, a general piece of advice around physicists is when they say, "We don't understand what's going on here," they really, really mean it. They're really in the dark. This got posted to the Atheist website because they thought, we don't need God because there's this stuff, something comes out of nothing very easily. But no, it doesn't actually explain that conundrum for those reasons.
But how do you get from random particles here and there to an entire universe spontaneously forming out of nothing and lasting for billions of years? The other half of the uncertainty principle says that physical objects can trade time for energy, and vice versa. For instance, something can pop into existence with a lot of energy if it only lasts a short time, or last a long time if it has very little energy. And physicists now believe the universe has as close to zero total energy as you can get. Why? Gravity. Gravity is the only force that always attracts, and that, counterintuitively, means it has negative energy. It counteracts the positive energy of the expanding universe. With its total energy near zero, uncertainty allows the universe to exist for potentially a very long time. But it doesn't explain how it grew from a tiny quantum sprout to be so mind-bendingly huge. For that you need inflation, which cosmologists think drove the early expansion of the universe. Observations of distant galaxies and cosmic background radiation suggest inflation was real, but what caused it is still a mystery. In the end, regardless of how the universe got to be so big, the laws of physics suggest that all of its energy, and hence all of its stuff, may add up to zero. So taken as a whole, the universe is just a strange form of nothing. Seen this way,
a strange form of nothing. And that's the other thing I want to talk about. If an atheist sees this and says, oh, the universe is still nothing, so it didn't need a creator, that would be a false conclusion based on the data that's been presented, because it conflates two different definitions of the word nothing. There's different kinds of nothing.
The question of how you get from nothing to something doesn't make any sense. Something and nothing may well be the same thing.
Yes and no. Something and nothing may well be the same thing. That depends on what you mean by nothing. So let's talk about that for a minute. We have this scale where because you could have a model where gravity is defined as negative energy, therefore it balances out to being almost but not quite low energy. So close to zero energy is basically like zero. So if it balances out to zero, then the universe is still nothing. But that's, as I said, that's conflating two different definitions of the word nothing. There's different kinds of nothing. There's net zero, and there's actual zero. Let's think about that. Actual zero. If there's a homeless guy that lives on the bridge down the street, and he right now spent his last money on a burger and he has no money, that's actual no money. But what if there's also a college student at the university down the street, and that college student has debt from their college loans, but they have a bunch of money in the bank? So their money in the bank and their loans balance out to just about zero. And you could say he has nothing, that college student. But those are two very different kinds of nothing. Shows the difference between net zero and actual zero. Or is an even more clear example, what if there is a family with a mother, father, and some children, and this family has 3 boys and 2 girls? You could say in this household there are more boys than girls, but then they have another baby girl, and with this new baby girl, now there's 3 boys and 3 girls in this family. Now, are you really going to say that that family has no people in it? No, it has net same number of boys and girls, but the family isn't empty. It just has stuff on both sides, and it balances out to zero in one sense of the term. So when you talk about the creation of the world, you need to deal with the problem of actual nothing to actual something, because we live in this universe that we can see. So this doesn't actually refute Christianity, because you still need to explain how we went from actual nothing to the something that we see everywhere around us. Not just that it balances out to zero. So really, if the atheist was trying to use this as some kind of evidence, that atheist would need to go along with this charade of saying the universe is really nothing. Trust me. That's not. There is one sense where, if you look at this model and that model, there's one sense where it's kind of true that the net entropy or net energy is almost but not quite to zero. But that's much different than saying that the universe is still nothing. It doesn't actually explain how God created the world. It doesn't explain where everything came from. The Christian worldview is able to explain where the universe came from, but the materialistic worldview is still not able to do that. And there's one more additional problem for the atheists with this educational video. That would be is that one of the strangest, this is about the same thing the video was talking about, one of the strangest properties of our universe is that it has a very low entropy. That's what the video just taught us with the nice pictures. Meaning there is relatively low disorder, or conversely, a large amount of order. And so this is something that's, as scientists, we're still trying to understand and we don't understand. This is really another problem for atheists, because if you look at what the scientists are saying is, we don't understand why the universe is so orderly. That would be something that Christians are able to understand very well. There's a good illustration here. Think of it this way. Imagine a bomb full of sand exploding onto an empty surface. That's the Big Bang. You would expect whoosh, just goes everywhere uniformly. You would expect a pretty uniform heap of sand after the explosion. Just everything is covered equally in sand dust. That's what happens when there is an actual explosion. But instead, our universe immediately arranged into lots of sandcastles, seemingly for no reason and with no help, and we don't really know why. Stephen Countryman, a physics PhD student at Columbia University, explained. And that's a good illustration. Now, as a Christian, I'm not saying, just give up on even trying to explain this amazing order, scientists. Go for it, science. Let's try to explain it. It's always beautiful to understand what God has done. But clearly, we've been able to see that this really upholds the Christian worldview, because only Christians are able to explain things like morality, why we can do science because the laws of physics don't change every day. Christians know why the laws of physics are consistent because we have an unchanging God. And we also are able to know why the laws of logic exist, because they reflect God is logical, and the laws of logic reflect the way that God thinks. So atheists are not able to explain morality or the laws of logic or why science is a thing that works. And also, this video actually does nothing, but the dilemma still remains. How can you have everything from nothing without a creator God? And you can't. So thanks. Next, there's a lot of other videos we'd want to do too. I want to look at one more atheist video. I just thought that one was so out there that I wanted to give it its own treatment. And then I also want to talk about different kind of fallacies someday. I think I want to make a video for fallacies of interpretation and hermeneutics, and general, and another one for general fallacies, and another one for specific fallacies of atheistic evolutionists. And then I also want to get back to the How to Talk to Mormons series, and also I want to make a huge long video on the authorship of the Book of Mormon. So a lot coming up, and hope it wasn't too distracting to have this cute baby here with us. Hey Luke, say hi. Goodbye.